wanted to talk to you about we have a deconstructing series that we just launched earlier this year. And what we do is we try to translate commonly used terms that people may use, but they may not understand. Mm-hmm. So we've looked at like psychological safety and stakeholder capitalism, and we're doing one on nudges. But some of the work that you did, and I think would probably warrant a deconstructing piece, is on intersectionality.
Yeah.
So do you maybe want to talk a little bit about intersectionality, what it means and why it's important?
Yeah, intersectionality has become like this huge boogeyman word right now, and people are terrified of it, but really is thinking about how people's experiences are different based on the identities that they possess. So Kimberly Crenshaw, the woman who coined the term intersectionality, actually said sexism for white women and sexism for black women are two different things, are experienced in two different ways. And it's all about looking at how these experiences are layered and nuanced and changed by the different identity points that people have. So it's thinking about if you have two cars going into an intersection and they both crash, it's hard to understand, like identify where exactly something hit. Looking at intersectionality, it's like, these two things collide, but what is the damage done? How are these things, where are their privilege, where are their point of privileges and power, where are their points of privileges and disempowerment? Really at this core of what we're talking about with intersectionality is really looking at where's power? How are some identities privileged? How are some identities not privileged? And when you have multiples of these layered on top of each other, integrated together, how does that change someone's experience? Because both of us have PhDs. Both of us are doctors. We have both taught in college classrooms, but you may have a different experience teaching at a certain institution, being the person that you are, than I do at the institutions I teach in, being the person that I am. So again, we both have a common thread. We both have PhDs. However, and we both are professors. However, we both have different experiences based on how we present ourselves and how people perceive us in our classrooms. So I think intersectionality isn't as terrifying as we think it is, but it really is thinking about going beneath the surface to interrogate why things exist the way they do. Why is sexism different? Why is sexism different for different types of women? Why are issues as it relates to chilly climate for professors different based on institutions they're at, right, or the type of person they are, if they're a white woman versus a woman of color or a trans person in a classroom. So I think those are all things we have to think about. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Okay, great.
So if you were like a CCO and they were thinking, like, how do I care about thinking about the surface structure, right? The critical sort of underlying institutions, what sort of things should they be focused on and thinking about within their organizations?
Well, within the organization, I think, again, every employee does not come to the organization with the same background, the same experience, the same knowledge. So really thinking about and interrogating what are the hidden beliefs that we have that we assume people know or assume people would understand coming into the organization. Thinking about that hidden curriculum that exists within corporate culture where you have these unspoken rules that certain people have had access to and know launching into the organization that other people have never heard of, never experienced, never knew about. There was like this story a long time ago about IBM. At one time, you knew that you couldn't wear certain colors. And again, if you didn't know that, if you had never heard that, if you didn't have anybody who worked at IBM before that told you, you would be sort of perceived as out of the loop and not
right,
trying their best. So I think it's all a matter of really interrogating what is the experience that we want people to walk out of here with, and what are we not telling people? What are we assuming? I think that's a the hardest part of culture is that it's assumed. And so making things explicit, and also too making it clear that your organization doesn't stand for exclusion.
Right.
And there's so many ways that we can be exclusionary that we don't think about, but how would you create an inclusive structure? And really thinking through that and talking with people. Academics are here as a resource. We have tons of people who work in organizational psychology or in organizational communication. They can help with those types of things. You have PR people, PR scholars who are working on internal comms and those types of things as well. So I think accessing the knowledge that's here. Also, we're cheaper than going to Bain or going to
Right, exactly.
McKinsey.
Buy some of the expensive ones, yeah.
Yeah, like we're cheaper.
Yeah.
Too. We still pay us, but we're cheaper. But you have people who have expertise and who have studied this, so bring them in to talk about these things with you as well. Also with CCOs, thinking about in the organization as well, thinking about accessibility.
Absolutely,
think about ramps rather than staircases when it snows. And it snows in Seattle, I believe.
It does sometime, yeah.
Doesn't snow here much. But when it snows, do you clear off the stairs or do you clear off the ramp first? You clear off the ramp so that everybody can use the ramp regardless of their accessibility, whether they're using a cane or a walker, whether they are in a wheelchair or a scooter. It's easier. We have to start thinking about the ramps and what are the simple things that we can do to create access for everyone in the workplace, not just certain groups. And so that requires a different way of thinking and a different way of approaching everyday things, such as your PowerPoints, or thinking about hallways, thinking about getting together in work environments. All of this has to change. So I think accessibility is really going to be the challenge. And that is going to be one thing that if you're not thinking about it now, you're going to be forced to think about it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I also think sometimes people lead by numbers. So they look at the majority in a survey. They're like, well, 60% of our employees say this, but should we always be guided by the majority when sometimes it's the minority numbers that need more help and they lack the access and equity that the sort of majority group have? And I saw this at a recent conference when they were talking about some of the programs they were doing or whether to speak out, but they look at the majority of the employees. And I just found that interesting. I was like, well, I don't think you should be guided by majority rule. It should really be about, like, is it the values? And so I feel like it's the same way, that if you're like, well, 75% of our employees feel like we have but you have the 25%. So who are the 25% and what is going on with them and why do they not feel this way? And I think the intersectionality piece is really important because we put people in buckets. We're like, well, here's our employees who are people of color, and then but that's so different because there's so many nuances with the intersectionality of different identities.
There are, and you have employees of color who are also veterans, who are also disabled, or you might have trans employees who are also, I don't know, veterans or other different groups.
Right.
And so it's not, people just don't hold one identity at one time. It's a confluence of everything. It's a mixture. You're constantly approaching things from the multitudes rather than the singular.
Right.
So it's very rare to come across a person. So it's like, I always think like this all the time. That's not, you're thinking about all of it together. And answers aren't simple. They're going to be complex and they're going to be complicated. There's going to be a lot of, again, I keep using the word nuance, but a lot of layering. There's going to be a lot of hidden things within the answers, within the decisions people are making that are influenced by where they come from, who they are, how they've been treated, past experiences that other people in their identity group have had. So all of those things, we don't think they have an impact on how people operate in a workplace or how they operate in the world, but they do.
Yeah.
And if you don't interrogate that, it's easy to make assumptions. It's easy to do stereotyping. It's easy to minimize people, and you don't want to do that. And also, too, I think there is importance of letting the voice of the minority be heard. In Robert's Rules of Order, you have to let the minority has the right to respond.
I can't believe you just brought up Robert Rules of Order.
It's important.
That's such a director move.
It is. It is. And I love Robert's Rules of Order. I actually was going to get certified in parliamentary procedure.
Were you really?
Yes.
Oh, I love this.
Because I'm such a nerd. And I like it. But, like, the minority has a right to respond to certain things and give their voice. And that's important.
Yes,
Even
absolutely.
if it's something you don't want to hear, you still have to hear it. And you still should be aware of it. And still should make plans on how to deal with that.
I think that's really important, even if you don't want to hear it. I feel like some people are scared to do research because they're afraid of what's going to come back, that they don't want to hear it.
Absolutely.
And that's how you make change, you have to listen. So
you have to listen. And sometimes it hurts. Trust me. I've led organizations, whether it's social organizations or whether it's in the workplace as an academic and being the leader of a group or a department. Like, there are some things that you don't want to hear. There are things that you're like, I thought we were doing well in this, and I'm going to stick my head in the sand and believe we're doing this right, by God. But if you don't get the feedback, you'll never be able to improve, and you'll never be able to make a difference if you don't address some of the minor failings, some of the changes, some of the things that people think are wrong, or are things that need to be shifted so they can accommodate other people. It's all about growth and change is hard. And having to do the research to hear these things and learn about these things, it's hard. But it's a part of being an adult, and a part of being a leader, and a part of being a PR person. You're supposed to be the person that's the organizational conscience. You have to hear all the sides and deal with some pretty icky, pretty mean, pretty horrible things that people have experienced or people are doing, and creating that change.
Absolutely.